What's up, Navigating Academia family? This is your buddy, Dr. J. Phoenix Singh, coming at you to be able to give an important message. And this is an important message that, honestly, I have been dealing with, guys, for so many years now in terms of people coming to me and asking for some guidance in terms of how to be able to get into graduate school and trying to get some kind of general career advice. And this has to do with student loan debt from the U.S. perspective. Now, if you're not in the U.S., then of course this may be of interest to you. Maybe it's not of interest, but our current president is Joe Biden, and one of the things that Joe Biden ran on as part of his platform was the concept of there being some kind of student loan forgiveness, or if nothing else, something being done to address the student loan crisis, some people would call it, that we have here in the United States right now. There's actually a fantastic, I think it's like a 30-minute Netflix series on money, and one of the episodes on is all about student loan debt. So I recommend going and watching that if you don't know about what's happening in the US with student loan debt. But essentially it's massive, the amount of student loan debt that individuals have in the US. And of course, on some of the videos that we talk about in terms of, depending on the topic here on the channel, we discuss how, for example, for clinical psych PhDs in the US versus clinical psych PsyD programs in the US, the difference between the programs in terms of tuition because of accessibility to funding can literally be hundreds of thousands of dollars in terms of the difference, usually, unfortunately, falling on the side of PsyDs in terms of where the amount of student loan debt essentially ends up being highest. This doesn't mean that you don't incur any student loan debt when it comes to being a clinical psych PhD student, but you have more accessibility to funding. The amount that you're going to end up paying in tuition because of that accessibility to funding is significantly less or nothing. But keep in mind that even if it's nothing, and even if you're making something like an extra $10K a year being a graduate assistant for a whole bunch of courses, or doing some work on the side, the likelihood you're going to be able to do grad school full time, especially for that kind of a program, and also work any kind of a job that would actually take care of you with regards to, fully paying for rent, fully paying for food, fully paying for gas, fully paying for this, that, and the other thing, is very low. Does it mean that it can't be done? Of course not. Trust me on these things. I have lived on a shoestring budget in the past when I was trying to do really big things, so I know how that is, and I have a lot of respect for you if you're in that stage of kind of building your life, building your career, and so forth. Keep in mind that a lot of people don't think enough about student loan debt. A lot of us grew up, like I'm a first-generation immigrant myself. This is the case where a lot of us grow up in settings like I grew up in, or maybe you're just the first person in your family to go to college, or you went to college, but you would be the first person in your family to go to graduate school. And so it's more important for us oftentimes in our heads, especially when we're quite young, to get that degree than it is to think about the practical ramifications and consequences of taking on a very substantial amount of student loan debt at a young age. Usually what happens in careers, I mean, honestly, I don't know for anybody where this isn't the case, is that you have kind of a curve insofar as when you begin your career, you're not making as much money as you do 10 to 15 years in it, provided you're not changing careers. And so if that's the case, when you take a look at kind of average salaries from websites like Bureau of Labor Statistics, for example, a lot of people will take a look at the average of the median and they'll say, oh, this is great, this is high enough that when I land a job directly after grad school, I can get paid this amount. But that usually is not the case. It's more something for most professions where it's going to take you a little bit of time to be able to, and when I say a little bit of time, I mean many years, to be able to kind of build into that potential and hopefully surpass it, obviously. But this is something we're taking on multi-hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loan debt from undergrad to, let's say, a master's or a doctoral degree, is something that it's very important, guys, that you sit down and you take the proper amount of time to think about. The worst thing that you can do is to be able to make it some kind of an impulsive decision to basically say, I'm going to worry about that later. Right? I want to be an X, whatever that is. Could be a medical doctor. It could be a business owner where you want to go and get an MBA, which you don't need, by the way. Or you want to be a lawyer, whatever it is. You want to be an engineer and so forth. And you say, okay, I need a college level degree for this, or I need for something like, let's say, clinical psych, I need a doctoral degree in most states to be able to practice, or at least to be able to practice independently for sure. So when that happens, we think about that. We say, I want to be, for me, a psychologist so bad, I will do anything. I will take on six-figure student loan debt just to be able to kind of take care of this. But usually when we're making those decisions, we're making them in our 20s or usually before the age of 35. Some of us, I've worked with so many of you who are non-traditional students, meaning that you, let's say, are changing your career, right? And maybe you happen to be in your 40s or your 50s, and you want to get into something like behavioral health, and you want to become a psychologist and so forth. I think that's great, right? And certainly in that case, the likelihood is higher that you are more financially established, and certainly when it comes to the things that I'm going to be talking about for the remainder of this video, you probably have a lot of this stuff kind of already sorted out budgetarily. But if you're younger like I was, I can tell you, hey, this falls on me too, right? Not having a budget and not understanding finances, not understanding money is one of the biggest mistakes that you're going to make in your entire life. Right? Am I saying don't take on student loan debt? That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is go into it with both eyes wide open and not with a view that, oh, this is no big deal. I, of course, will be able to pay this off. I, of course, will get my dream job and so forth, because nothing in this world is guaranteed, unfortunately. And the number one priority that I have for all of you in our community is that you have a happy and healthy life. And a happy and healthy life is not one that is focused only on work. It's also focused on family, and it's also focused on your personal life. And because of that, it's very important that you take a comprehensive view of not only the amount of student loan debt that you're willing to take on, and of course, the rate that you're able to actually borrow it at, which changes. But in addition to that, you also want to take into consideration your potential earnings. Because if you end up taking on something like $150,000, $200,000 of student loan debt for a job that's going to pay you, let's say, an entry salary of $60,000 to $65,000 a year, that is not a good deal for you. Okay, again, yes, it could be your dream, it could be these sorts of things, but you need to think about other things in your future that you may want to do that debt could actually hold you back on. All right, again, am I telling you not to do it? I'm not necessarily telling you not to do it, but I am telling you, you have to think about these things, guys. You have to think about retirement, right? There's so much we can talk about when it comes to stocks and just ETFs, mutual funds, and these things. I have other videos on this channel about that. But the idea is that you can't even be responsibly thinking about long-term strategic planning in terms of, oh, I'm going to put this much money in, per month into stocks and bonds and these things. We should be throwing everything we can at this debt, depending on what the rate is that you borrowed it at, and also how long you're deferring the payments of that debt and whether or not those deferrals did anything to the amount of debt that you need to pay off. All right. These are all very important things to be able to think about. Sit down even with a financial planner to be able to discuss. Many of you may think, Dr. Singh, what are you talking about? I don't even have a financial plan for my future yet. I don't even have a budget. Well, guys, this is something that's very important, is to be able to build a budget. Building budgets is not sexy. Building budgets is something that's going to make you feel probably very limited, very restricted. And many of you are probably like me during my 20s, where I did not have any kind of budget. And to be honest, I had kind of like magical thinking insofar as it'll just all work out somehow. And most of the time it did, and sometimes it did not. And I ended up getting, overdraft fees, and that impacted my credit score and all this kind of stuff. And it was all due to me being irresponsible and basically not wanting to be a grown-up, which is something that I had to grow into. And I built my first budget when I was 30, right? And then after that, I've tried to stay religiously on budget. And of course, the budget has grown over time with, the blessing that I have had in terms of being, at least moderately successful. But it doesn't mean that you kind of stop then and you just say, okay, great, no more budget ever. You just evolve it over time. And the cool thing about that is that you get to see over time kind of where you started and where you are now. So it's kind of like a little game that you may want to play with yourself, which is kind of cool. But a lot of people have told me that they were kind of banking on the idea that Joe Biden, so our president right here in the United States right now at the time of this filming, here in 2021, that he was going to forgive student loans, that this was a priority, priority. And so, we were expecting to see this year in the budget that student loans were going to be either completely forgiven or, slashed, a huge amount and so forth, which of course I didn't think was going to happen, but it's one of these things where a lot of people were really using that as part of their graduate school strategy. It is not a good strategy, guys, to plan on part of your loan being forgiven by the government, right? Nothing is ever truly free. So even if we did have something like this sort of, student loan forgiveness, the likelihood is that, we press something down here, something else is going to pop up somewhere else, right? Sometimes we'll be on the short end of the stick in terms of depending on what our demographics are, our socioeconomic strata and so forth. Sometimes we'll come out on the short end of the stick. Sometimes we'll come out on the long end of the stick when it comes to that. But we should never make decisions based on hopes that something is going to happen in the future in terms of the government cutting us some slack, okay? And it's just really something that I felt passionate about making this video for you on. Why? Because again, last year, several of you told me that this was part of your strategy, was assuming that at some point in the next several years, Biden will do something to be able to cut out student loan debt, right? This is something where maybe there will be some policies in the future, which would certainly not be a bad thing, but assuming that it's going to happen is very dangerous. There's a great saying that I love, which is that, winning the lottery would be great, but it's not a very good retirement strategy, right? And this is the exact same thing. Would it be nice? Sure. Should we bet on it happening? Absolutely not. So please, guys, do me a huge favor and create a budget. Right? There's so many different budgeting apps out there. You can use one like Every Dollar. There's another one out there which actually syncs up with a lot of bank accounts, depending on what kind of bank you use, called Mint. There are so many of these that will largely automate the process of budgeting for you and showing you where your money is going on a monthly basis. And this is critical, especially when it comes to family planning, which is something that I know that a lot of us, when I was in my early 20s, I thought that I'd be 25 and have at least one kid. Like, that's just what I thought to myself. I love children, right? That's not how it ended up happening for me, right? Other people will be the opposite. They'll say, I want to have kids when I'm 35, and then all of a sudden they'll be 21, and all of a sudden they've got a kid, right? But that's neither here nor there. But the idea is that when it comes to, planning financially for your family, it's very important that we don't make large-scale decisions like taking on multi-$100,000 student loan debt without really thinking about it and budgeting things out, or talking to somebody who can walk you through whether or not it's actually a wise investment, or whether, let's be honest, sometimes it's our ego that says, I want this particular degree so that my family will be proud of me, so my friends will be proud of me, so my parents will be proud of me, so that somebody will be proud of me, right? When in actuality, you should be proud of yourself already, which I know is a very difficult thing to achieve. So if you ever want to talk about these things one-on-one, please don't hesitate to book a one-on-one session with me below here, and we can talk about your career goals, your career plans, but also your personal life goals and plans, and make sure that everything lines up before you spend a huge amount of time or a huge amount of money or go into a huge amount of debt to be able to go and get master's and doctoral degrees, because some degrees are absolutely worth it and other ones are a total and complete waste of your time and money. And you guys know me here on this channel. I always shoot you straight. So I appreciate your time in watching this episode, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Peace.